One morning, you forget why you walked into the room. Later, you can't recall a name, even though you just heard it. You sit down with a book, like always. But the words don't stick. And you wonder, when did my mind stop feeling like mine? For many seniors over 60, this is the quiet fear that creeps in. But there is hope. If you watch this episode, you'll uncover the daily habit that quietly chips away at memory, and the simple steps you can take to protect your brain and stay sharp as you age. Where East meets West to help you stay strong, clear, and independent after 60. Now, hear this. A study in neurology found that most memory decline in seniors isn't just aging, it's lifestyle. How we sleep, eat, connect, and how we treat the brain when no one's looking. When we miss that shift, we lose more than memory. We lose confidence. We blame stress. We joke about getting old. But behind the lapses is often a pattern, and it can be reversed. And to help us understand it, sitting across from me is someone who's seen it for over a century and still practices medicine today. Japan's oldest physician. So good to have you back.
Amazing, John. So, first of all, memory loss is not a punishment. It's a message. And our habits, they're the language. The right habits don't just support the brain. They teach it how to stay alive inside.
That really resonates, because for so many seniors listening, that's the silent frustration. You're doing what always worked. Reading, staying active, keeping busy, but your mind doesn't respond like it used to, and it's so easy to blame it on age.
I understand, John, but it's not just age. It's also misalignment. I've seen this in thousands of patients. People who feel like they're slipping, not because the memory's failing, but because their brains are starved of the rhythm and rest they once had. Habits that once fueled focus years ago can now quietly drain it. So today I'll uncover the everyday patterns I see with so many seniors that silently weaken memory, and the science-backed habits that can bring it back. And I urge you to stay until the very end, because I'll share the 2 simple rituals from Japan that I still follow every day to keep my mind sharp, even past 100.
I'm so glad you said that, because one of my patients, a man named Harold, sat across from me with tears in his eyes, not from fear, but from frustration. He said, "I still read, I still keep busy, but I can feel my mind slipping." And when we looked closer, it wasn't his effort that was failing. It was the daily habits he trusted most.
I've heard that same fear more times than I can count. I feel like I'm losing myself. But in truth, most people aren't broken. They're just missing the right signals to support their brain.
So let's change that today. What habits are quietly stealing memory, and which ones can help bring it back?
The first habit is one people rarely take seriously enough, and that is neglecting deep, consistent sleep. Memory doesn't form when we're awake. It forms when the brain is offline, at rest, quietly stitching together everything we've learned. Sleep isn't passive. It's memory's workshop.
That makes sense. Most people think if they sleep 6 or 7 hours, that's enough. But what's actually happening in the brain during that time?
What matters most isn't just the number of hours. It's the quality and rhythm. During deep sleep, the brain clears waste proteins, stores new information, and strengthens neural pathways. And if that process is interrupted, memory storage is too.
So even if someone gets to bed at midnight and wakes up at 8 a.m., it might not be restorative.
Exactly. The brain is tuned to the body's internal clock, the circadian rhythm. When we push that rhythm out of sync, we don't get the same mental benefits. And it's worse when screens are involved. The blue light from phones and TVs delays melatonin release, which means even if we're lying down, The brain doesn't believe it's time to rest. That light keeps the mind alert, but only on the surface. Deep memory work, especially in the hippocampus, never begins. Over time, the brain starts skipping stages of sleep entirely, and we feel it as forgetfulness, brain fog, or that mental slowness that creeps up in our 60s and 70s.
That fog, I hear about it all the time. Seniors say, "I'm not tired, but I feel cloudy." You're saying that's not age, that's interrupted sleep cycles.
Often, yes. And if poor sleep continues long enough, it begins to mimic early cognitive decline.
But here's what I find troubling. Many older adults sleep lighter as they age. They wake up more. They nap in the afternoon. Their rhythms shift. So how can they protect their memory if deep sleep is harder to access?
You don't fight the rhythm. You adjust the environment around it. That means honoring sleep like a ritual, not an afterthought. Going to bed at the same time, dimming lights an hour before, keeping phones out of the bedroom. Those are simple but powerful steps.
It's clearer to me now. Sleep isn't just about rest. It's about rhythm. When we disrupt that rhythm, memory starts to fragment. But it makes me wonder, beyond sleep, what's the next habit that is quietly doing the same thing, pulling memory apart without us even noticing?
The next habit is one we carry in our hands all day. Digital distraction. The brain cannot store what it does not first focus on. And every time we switch apps, check messages or scroll without thinking, we are fragmenting our attention. Over time, that constant fragmentation makes memory feel slippery, like trying to grab water with your hands.
So it's not just about what we're doing, but how scattered our attention has become.
Exactly. Multitasking isn't efficiency, it's erosion. The brain has to reset every time it shifts focus, and that costs energy. Especially in older adults, that cognitive fatigue builds up fast.
That explains so much. I hear from seniors who say, "I wasn't even doing anything hard, but I feel mentally drained." They assume it's age, but it sounds more like overload.
It is. When the brain is bombarded all day, it can't enter the calm, focused state where memory forms. It's like trying to write on a shaky table. Japanese culture still honors these pauses. Tea without a screen, walking without headphones, sitting in silence after meals. These aren't luxuries. They are mental recovery.
That stillness, it's rare now.
And that's the danger. We've replaced depth with speed. Social media floods the brain with dopamine, quick rewards, shallow engagement. But memory needs repetition, space, and stillness. Without that, it breaks apart under the weight of constant input.
So the brain is overstimulated but undernourished.
That's the paradox. Information keeps coming in, but none of it gets processed deeply enough to stay. We forget what we read 5 minutes ago, not because we're forgetful, but because our minds never had time to hold it.
It's frustrating. You think, "I just read that," or "I know I opened that email," but the memory isn't there. It feels like your mental stamina is fading, like your brain is always on, but never sharp. So what can someone do, if their attention is already scattered, to help the brain reset?
It's not just about stepping away from screens. The brain resets most deeply through connection, real connection, not notifications but conversation, not noise but shared meaning.
So what kind of connection, beyond the superficial, actually helps memory heal?
The key is social engagement that challenges and nourishes the mind. Studies show that older adults who are isolated or lonely tend to experience faster decline in memory, verbal fluency, and processing speed over time. Real conversation, emotional sharing, even mild disagreement, those force the brain to stay active. And when we feel seen by others, stress in the brain's fear circuits also diminishes, which creates space for clarity.
That makes sense. So it's both mental workout and emotional support.
Exactly. When you're talking with someone, listening, responding, changing perspective, your brain flexes in ways idle browsing never does. These exchanges stimulate hippocampal networks and preserve neural connections. In Japan, elders often gather for daily tea or kanpai circles, shared time where ideas flow and memory is exercised without technology interfering.
And that kind of habit, is it truly protective?
Yes, data from long-term cohort studies suggest social isolation increases dementia risk significantly, sometimes by 25% to 60%. The brain literally reorganizes when deprived of social stimuli. In one English longitudinal study, people with high levels of isolation experienced sharper memory decline over a 2-year span compared to those with richer social networks.
So you're saying memory loss can partly be prevented by reconnecting?
In many cases, yes. Reconnection triggers cognitive reserve, the brain's ability to absorb damage while still functioning. Whether in Japan or the US, people with stronger social ties tend to preserve memory longer, even if pathological changes are present.
And this is not just anecdotal.
Not at all. A 9-year study from Johns Hopkins found socially isolated elders had a 27% higher chance of developing dementia. Another analysis of multiple studies showed that feeling lonely increases dementia risk by roughly 31%, independent of depression and vascular health.
That's compelling. So how do we bring this into daily life?
We begin small. See a neighbor, call an old friend, join a book club or art class. In Japan, community salons let older residents gather for conversation, tea, games. Even a weekly bridge, night or discussion group activates memory circuits. These are not optional extras. They're essential mental nourishment.
And it's never too late.
Indeed, as soon as you reconnect, your brain starts to repair. But the more isolated you've been, the more important it becomes to commit.
So if we've looked at sleep, then distraction, now social connection. Please stay with me, everyone. We are almost there. So, doctor, what about nourishment? What kind of food and habits feed the brain from inside out?
If we want the brain to function clearly, we must begin with what fuels it. But not all food is fuel. Some is friction. Especially after 60, the body becomes more selective in what it can absorb and even more reactive to what it cannot. That's why balance and quality matter more than ever.
So it's not just eat more, it's eat smarter?
Exactly. And that reminds me, in our last episode on the top 10 superfoods for seniors, which I really recommend you to watch afterwards, we explored this same truth from a different angle. We talked about how certain foods can reverse weakness, support balance, and even ease inflammation. But today, the focus shifts higher to how nutrition sharpens memory itself.
Right. And that's where the connection clicked for me. If the same food that strengthens your legs can also strengthen your recall, that's not just efficient, that's empowering.
It is, because too often we wait until something goes wrong to change the input, yet the brain is hungry all the time. Proteins, healthy fats, vitamins and minerals, they're not optional. They're the scaffolding for memory.
And when that scaffolding is missing,
the brain weakens in silence. You don't feel it all at once. You just start losing names, losing threads, losing clarity. But underneath, it's nutritional misfire.
What's powerful about what you're saying is that it's not about blame. It's about blindness. We're not trained to see how memory is built at the cellular level.
Right. For example, diets rich in ultra-processed foods have been strongly linked to cognitive decline in older adults. One Japanese longitudinal study found that seniors who followed a traditional diet, high in fish, vegetables, seaweed, soy, and green tea, had significantly lower rates of brain atrophy over time.
So even structural damage slows, just by changing what's on your plate?
Yes. One analysis showed that women on this diet had nearly half the rate of total gray matter shrinkage compared to those eating in a more westernized pattern. That's not opinion. That's anatomy.
That's staggering, especially considering how often we hear that nothing can be done once memory fades.
But something can. The brain uses up to 25% of our daily energy, despite being only 2% of our body weight. So the fuel must be efficient, not wasted. That's why whole foods, not just calories, matter. Sardines, mackerel, leafy greens, fermented vegetables, these help restore neurotransmitters, blood flow, and inflammation balance.
It's humbling, really. The solution isn't locked in a lab. It's sitting in our kitchen.
Exactly. And more than that, the gut and brain are in constant conversation. Over 90% of serotonin is made in the gut. So when digestion suffers from poor hydration, stress, or processed food, memory begins to suffer too.
So you're saying we don't just digest food, we digest clarity.
Beautifully put. That fog people feel, that lack of mental stamina, often it's not age, it's the body signaling a need for better fuel.
It reminds me of something I've heard many times. A listener says, "I just don't feel sharp anymore." They think it's sleep or stress. And yes, those matter. But food is the most constant input we give the brain every single day. So if someone listening wants to reclaim that clarity from the inside out, what's a simple place to start?
Begin with one shift. Replace one packaged meal with a whole one. Add fermented vegetables to dinner. Swap sugary drinks for green tea. And start the day with hydration. Because water too is a memory tool.
That's doable. That's not a treatment. That's a choice.
And it's a choice that compounds. Because memory isn't just what we store, it's what we're still capable of learning.
That's the mindset shift, isn't it? That the brain isn't in decline. It's waiting for support. We've now explored how sleep resets memory, how distraction shatters it, how connection rebuilds it, and how food fuels it. But I want to close with this. For you personally, doctor, what small daily ritual, beyond all the science, has helped keep your mind steady well into your hundreds?
Yes, John. As promised, it's 2 rituals, small, quiet, but powerful. Each morning, before I speak to anyone, I light incense. I sit in stillness just for 5 minutes and listen to my breath. This isn't meditation as the West defines it. It's more like remembering my place in the rhythm of the day.
That's beautiful. Almost like you're giving the brain a soft wake-up call.
Exactly. And the second? I write one thank you, by hand, every evening, no matter how I feel.
Just one.
One is enough. One name, one reason. It anchors me in connection and trains the brain to notice the good, even in small doses. Neuroscience now calls this neuroplasticity, but long before that word, we just called it gratitude.
And it's not just emotional, right? It actually shapes memory.
Yes, studies now show that gratitude practices can improve both working memory and sleep. And more importantly, They reduce the mental clutter that comes from stress. These two simple rituals, presence and thanks, they don't take more than 10 minutes combined, but I believe they've given me decades, because when the mind is calm and open, memory flows freely, not as data, but as wisdom.
That's something we don't hear enough. Memory as wisdom.
And wisdom doesn't shout, it arrives in stillness. These small habits don't just preserve the mind, they prepare it for joy, for connection, for learning even now.
And that's what I'll take from today. That sharpness isn't just about neurons and nutrients. It's also about how we meet the day, with rhythm, with attention, and with meaning. Now, if you are listening, please support us by leaving a comment and giving a thumbs up. I recommend you watching this 10 Superfood episode next.